Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Let's Design Diablo. This is episode 7 where we do some more work on the textures in the bottom bar and the skill areas on the left and right side of the bar. So we're just continuing on where we left off and sort of getting out of this little bit of a rut that we're in design-wise, but it does start to come together a little bit more in this video, I believe. So let's get into it and see where we're at. Okay, so this is where we left it off, and we had the challenge last time of trying to figure out what if anything is going on with the ends of these of the bar. And so on the left-hand side, we have like a rock texture back there that's sort of fading it out into what could be the gameplay area underneath, and on the right, we're trying to figure that out. It's an open question as to whether the bar would extend the entire width of the screen or whether it would just sort of be something in the middle, almost like Diablo 3 is. And it could really go either way, so we're just sort of feeling it out to see which way it's going to go here. Looking at this little shine to see whether we want to use that red glow in the middle. It's neat, but it's just there because it's there right now. It's not probably going to end up there. I'm just going to show and hide some different layers to see what it is we want to keep or throw out over there. Liking a lot of what's going on there, but there are some things about it that don't make a ton of sense, I guess. Reducing the opacity really helps, and just making it darker helps to blend it in with the texture that's to the right of it. So we're going to mess with the levels, and that's oftentimes a good way to do what you need to do in that respect. So that looks pretty good. It's blended in pretty well. There's a decent amount of red coloring in there, which is something we keep going back and forth on about whether or not we want a hint of the color from the globes to be, present outside of the globes themselves. So that's pretty good in terms of that part of the bar blending in with the rest of it. kind of a neat effect. Don't mind it. It's still, I think, not really coming together perfectly well, but maybe it's a step in the right direction. So we're trying to figure out how the skill icon is going to fit into that area, and so coming to the realization that, at least with the width of the canvas as it is, it's not really going to fit over there unless it's part of the bar. So I think it's around this time that we sort of abandoned the idea of the bar not going all the way across, which is totally fine. In fact, just thinking about it now, I like how in D1 and D2 the gameplay area is framed by the interface. It's not like the interface and the gameplay area are totally, distinct. So, and then in Diablo 3, it's just this thing that lives at the bottom and the middle of the screen. I could see how in development that could be easier than trying to accommodate a bunch of different, widths of people's screens. So if you just make it something static in the middle, then you don't have to worry about that. However, I do like having it go all the way across. It sort of makes it seem as though the game is happening and this is your window into that world. And that's the way it was in D1 and D2, and we really didn't hear anyone complaining about that. So I think that's a totally legitimate design choice. So we're playing now also with this texture that's going on top. We've been using this sort of all over the place in the image, and we're messing around with the blending layers. Now we have a real strong red color. The textures are great. I think the color itself is a little bit too prominent, but I think what we end up doing is bringing the saturation down so that it's not as bright. And even a hint of red really takes the eye, or draws the eye, I don't know about away, but it competes with the red color that's in the health globe. So I'm going to be really subtle about doing that. We want to really ask whether it makes sense to do that at all, even though it is sort of appealing. It's also a little bit of an issue too, and I mentioned this before, that um, the gargoyle and the angel are coming sort of out of nowhere. There's like that little separator underneath them, but they're not. It's not really clear how or why they're coming out of the background and into the foreground. So that's something we do work on in subsequent videos. But for now, we're just messing with the coloring of that layer that we put on top. Seeing again just how much, if any, red or blue, as the case may be on the right hand side, we want to show through. And focusing in on the pointed area, that little V shape to that crack where there's that bright red, thinking about how do we just tone down that one portion, that one little part of it, while keeping the rest pretty much as red as it is. One way you can do that is with an adjustment layer that you put on top of the layer itself, and then you mask it so that the adjustment layer is only applying to that one part that needs to be fixed. Okay, we're also using a clipping mask here. And a clipping mask will take the layer underneath, and this is probably not the proper explanation of it, but what it means to me is that it takes the layer underneath it and only applies itself to the pixels that exist on the layer underneath, sort of like a mask. I'm sure there's a better, more technical explanation for what a clipping mask does, but that's sort of what it's always done to me. So you could see that we reduce the intensity of just that one little red part, but not the whole thing. Now we're looking at the area behind the gargoyle. It looks like we probably need a shadow of some kind back there, because it's yeah, there we go. Yeah, so so that it doesn't really just look like he's a photo sitting on top of the background texture. So it looks like the two things are interacting, and he's casting a bit of a shadow on what's behind him. Or her. Maybe it's a female gargoyle. Who knows? Thinking about what part of that image we want to show to highlight the textures in red of the bottom left part there, just moving it around while keeping the mask in place so that it just changes kind of the part of the layer that's being masked. And now we're messing with this little spot of blood to see if that makes sense to use, and I do like it. Definitely it's going to be used somewhere. I'm not sure there or not, but little little effects like that can really add a lot if they're done properly. If they're overused, if there's blood dripping all over the place, that's definitely not what you want. And if they're not used at all, it can start to feel, well, you're just not taking advantage of an effect like that, which is fine, except that it can really add a lot if done right. Still messing with the hue and the saturation of that texture on top. I think probably coming to the conclusion here that less is more in terms of the color, because the more blacks and dark grays that are in there, in grays and whites, and the less saturation you have, the more the eye is drawn to the globe itself. So if we can keep the interesting look of that texture but without using the color, then that's probably where we want to be. But it is fun to mess around with the color. So I think what I'm trying to do here is give it a bit of a bronze look maybe, and frankly do not remember why I was going so heavily into the greens, but I think earlier on we had a design that looked somewhat bronze. There were parts of it that looked like metal-ish, And I really like that. Probably going to bring that back at some point. And I think it's possible that this is headed in that direction, or we're messing around with that. Not really not a bad idea. I don't think we end up going in that direction here. And again, the struggle is really going to be, how does this translate to the right-hand side? We're doing all this work on the left, but we have to do the same amount of work on the right, only make it a little bit different so that we don't run into that issue of it being too symmetrical. So I think at some point we just say, okay, good enough on the left here, and we go work on the right. Another thing we'll eventually do is work to get the skill icons back in there. And not that this is wasted effort, because again, I think that this is the kind of thing that you can work on, get away from, and then when you're in a little bit of a slump, come back to and just like turn this layer on, and there's an interesting texture that you can work with to kind of get out of the slump that you're in. So yes, I'm just thinking about what happens, what's going on with this texture in this area, and also underneath the bar in the middle. We're cleaning some things up. There's a little bit of a divider there that's sticking out, or we don't want. It's just a matter of finding those layers and erasing from them. So sometimes I like to just stop and say, okay, if this was at the bottom of my screen and I was playing a game, what would it look like? And usually when I do that with this design, I'm feeling very confident about it. And I really would love to play a game with that at the bottom. I think that would be really great. It's still a lot of work to be done, but it gives you a little bit of a preview. And it's nice to be able to do that. Photoshop will allow you to hide everything else and just show you the canvas itself, which is a fun feature. It's nice for design, but you can't see any of the palettes or anything, so it's not really practical a lot of times while you're designing, but it can be a great way to take stock of where you are. And I think when we do that now, we're seeing something that's definitely unfinished. I mean, there's a lot that is not resolved yet, but the overall direction, I think, is one that I'm pretty happy with. And even that bottom left part looks real nice, I think. We may find that it's impractical and that we move away from it, but again, that doesn't mean we don't use it somewhere else later to great effect. So I'm not worried about that at all. Sometimes on the stream I'll just talk through some things and not be working on anything at a specific time like this, where we're just looking at where we are, trying to figure out what the next move is going to be. So that's sort of what I'm doing now, and we're thinking now about the bottom left and bottom right and introducing the skill icons back in, because at some point we are going to need to obviously do that. So this is a little bit of a divider that we're thinking about using, but it doesn't look quite right. And that would be a divider that separates the bar itself from the skill icon. Yeah, so we're also thinking now about what happens on the bottom right. We did all this work on the bottom left, but how does that translate to the other side? Cleaning up a little bit some of the border that went behind the health globe. Oh yeah, we're also looking at these little splashes of blue and red, which are a little bit hard to see, but that I think are pretty cool. I guess we're just sort of asking, do we want to keep them? Where should they go? How bright, how prominent should they be? And in a later video, we'll see them be used to to greater effect, I think. And there's piece of that image that we're using there that works pretty well as sort of a, I don't know, a glow, a fiery sort of burny type effect. So we're thinking about the right hand side, and what are we going to do over there? So that's the exact same texture. It looks way too symmetrical when you do that. So what do we do over here? What part of that rock texture do we use to as the edge, the end of the bar? It's pretty tricky to function as sort of the end cap. It has to have like a sort of a hard edge, but also has to look like very natural. And the bottom left, I think, does that, but we struggle a bit with the bottom right. Yeah, noticing that it actually looks pretty cool right there. Who knows? Everything is mutable at this point. We're not committed to anything at all, so that middle bar can be there or not be there. So if something looks good with it not there, then work with it. And I do like how that rock texture is fitting in. So yeah, now we're just showing the middle, where the middle of the canvas is, so we can try putting in like that gem ornament down there. Working to fit that in, and then we'll move the. We're gonna see like how does the rock come in front of or behind it? Where does it live? And once we move this bar back down, where do we put it? Do we like it where it is? Trying to get it to snap to the center, which for some reason it's not doing for me. So I think I just end up eyeballing this, which is fine. There's probably pixels like, I don't know, way out on the far right or left, so Photoshop probably doesn't know where the center of that layer is. So that's not bad. Trying in good faith to get that texture consistent, but it is pretty challenging. It's going to be an ongoing question. What do we do with the center area? Where do we put those horizontal ornamented bars? So like that's pretty cool. Very gothic, I think, and definitely the right kind of aesthetic. But everything is still not working together so well. Especially you see the little ornaments on the bottom of each globe. They're not flowing into the bar anymore. They're just floating there. So that needs to be addressed. So we are still working out of this, I would say, slump still, but we're getting closer to taking a significant step in the right direction. We're always moving in the right direction. It just sometimes feels like progress is slow. So making this brighter. Not sure why it was so dark, but making it brighter, landing it there, is not bad. I think that can, that's usable, at least for now. It's good enough to maybe move on to something else and figuring out where do we use that glow. I think the glow is, kind of like eye candy right now. It doesn't really make sense because it draws the eye in way too much, but it does look good. So sometimes you put something like that there just to feel good about what you're doing in the long run, even though that's not super practical. It could be at the bottom. It could provide a sort of highlight at the edge of the screen on the bottom. Let's see what this little accent does. Not bad there. I believe we start to address the little ornaments on the bottom of the globes to see if we can get them properly positioned. some things that are really working well. Yeah, where the cursor was just moving around there. The rock textures I think look pretty nice. I did just remove them because I think the idea now is to try to get these little ornaments in the right place. The question is, what do we need to move for that to happen? If you move them just up like that, the one on the bottom doesn't really flow around the globe the same way. It doesn't look as good. So I'm thinking about, all right, do we move the bar down? But when you move the bar down, the little gem in the middle sort of goes too far down and just goes off the screen a little bit in sort of an awkward way. So neither option is working particularly well here yet. Right, so the only option that is sure to work is to move the entire globe up to meet that bar. To meet that bar. Which, because a number of videos ago we linked all the layers that comprise each globe, becomes much easier than it would otherwise be to do. Still not, easy, but easier, because when you select any one of those layers that you have linked, like I said grouped, but whatever it is, linked, it selects all of the linked layers, which sometimes can be annoying, but in this case really does help. So now we have them in basically the right place, and things are looking relatively good. I think we're just messing around. We're just showing and hiding some layers to see if there's any ideas in there that are going to work. Now, I bring up this little arch as a potential way to house the skill icon, and it actually looks really, really nice, I think. That sort of ornamented oval type shape. And not exactly sure how it's going to blend into the rocks or anything like that, but definitely the right idea, the right direction to go in. It's going to mess with all that sort of end cap that we had worked on for so long on the left, but we sort of knew all along that was not going to fly as well as it was. And again, it's something we can bring back later and use somewhere else, so not at all worried about that. And I think we're just finishing up, probably just talking through what was done today. And it'll wrap up here. Okay, so that was episode 7, and decent progress was made there. Still pretty slow, just getting us out of the little bit of a rut that we were in. But more progress to be made in the future. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.